The second list in the fourth section of the Satipatthana is the 5 aggregates. The 5 aggregates is a particular model of deconstructing our experience of ourselves as a human being, our body and our minds, into 5 categories. There could be other ways of deconstructing what a human being is, but this is the particular model. And I'll just list the 5, and then we can discuss why it could be useful to reflect and bring mindfulness to our own experience in this way. So the first of the 5 is the physical body. The next 4 are all qualities of mind. The first, as we talked about earlier, Vedana. There's the whole section, the second section of the Satipatthana on mindfulness of Vedana, feeling tone. That's the pleasant or unpleasant, or kind of in between sometimes. It's neither pleasant nor unpleasant. For shorthand, we say neutral. That's the second, is the Vedana. That's part of our experience. The third is perception. Perception is the quality or the process in the mind that takes raw sense input and assembles it and gives it meaning. For example, when we see something, we know, say you're looking at a meditation bell, bowl-shaped bell that we often use to ring to start and end meditation. When you look at that bell, if someone asked you, what do you see? We would mostly say you see bell. But actually, you're not seeing a bell. There is light in different colors, different patterns, landing on the retina of your eye. That's what you're seeing. And then in the brain or in your mind, we assemble that and we know, we give that a name, bell. So in that way, really what's always going on is just a mass of ever-changing sense inputs coming in. And then our mind, or you could say our brain, creates and assembles that into to what it is. So we give a name and meaning to things. That process is going on all the time, and you can't always notice it. It could drive you a little bit crazy. It's too much, but there's a reason why it might help us. We'll come back to that in a few moments. There's a reason why it might help us to purposely pay attention to that process sometimes. So the physical body, Vedana, feeling tone. The third, perception. The fourth is a big topic, which is in Pali, sankharas. And sankharas has various translations. It can be concoctions, where we're in the mind. It basically is the mental process of volition is part of it. You could put all volitional mental processes in that category. I think thoughts would fall into that category. Impulses for things would be in what we call sankharas. Concoctions just means that process of the mind that creates reality, creates stories, creates views and opinions. It's a big topic in sankharas. And then the fifth is consciousness. And so each one of these we can bring our mindfulness to, and the instructions is very simple. We're aware of its changing nature is what it's asking us to do. So if you put your mindful attention on the body, remember the first section of the Satipatthana were 6 different contemplations or practices, mindfulness of the body practices. So we were doing this practice already in different ways. So you can either use that formulation from the first section, or as an experiment, just in a general way, bring your attention into the body and be aware of, first just bare awareness, bare mindfulness of what's going on. And you can purposely put your attention onto the fact that it's changing. So the experience of the body is always changing, and you can look to notice that. Depending on what's happening, sometimes change may not be as immediately obvious, but we can start to notice the sensations, whatever it is in the body, even if you're using a 4 elements kind of model, any of these models, it's always changing. We can be aware of that. Similarly, we took in the second section in the Satipatthana on Vedana, we've already discussed that. So it's come back here again in this model. We can be aware, not only mindful of the pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral aspect of an experience, but we can be aware that it's changing. It doesn't stay the same. Things can be pleasant and then that can kind of fade out, or something new comes along and it's unpleasant. So it doesn't stay fixed. The third, around perception, there are changes that can happen in perceptions. We think we see or understand something a certain way. There's a story in one of the old texts where you're walking along the path in the forest and you see a snake, and then you're afraid and you jump back, and then you look down and you see, oh, it wasn't a snake, it was a coil of rope. That would be an example of perception where we didn't even notice that the mind is creating a reality. So you can play with that, and perceptions change. Just in the example I gave, there was a certain perception of seeing the coil as a snake. You realize what it is, the perception changed. So that's something you can work with your mindfulness. The fourth, on sankharas, I think for simplicity here, we'll just think of it as all the other mental processes going on. There's volitional impulses, intentions, there's all the thinking, there's just a lot in sankharas. So for now, just everything else mental, we can be aware. And of course, it's easy to see that that is changing just constantly. Consciousness, the fifth, is an interesting one, because many of us might say, well, consciousness doesn't really appear to be changing. You have to be conscious, you have to be aware to know any of these. But we know consciousness is not fixed. We have the word in English, unconscious. If you've been in deep, dreamless sleep, where was consciousness there? It's not the same as when you're awake. If you've ever had general anesthesia in surgery, you're unconscious. So we know the experience of consciousness changes. And so even as we move about in the day, our awareness, our consciousness can be clearer, it can be duller. So that one's a little harder to get a handle on, maybe, but that's another aspect of what it is to be a human being. This practice can be done, as with all the practices, I've spoken of them as being prescriptive or descriptive. And so prescriptive, it's prescribing, telling us how to practice. And so we can take on this idea of using the 5 aggregates model in a prescriptive way. But also it can be thought of as descriptive, going back to the very first practice of mindfulness of breathing, and just using that as a practice to settle and steady the mind. And as the samadhi side, the concentration, the undistracted side of our practice deepens, we're naturally more aware of things more and more on its own. And so you can see for yourself if that's true. Do you naturally become more aware of the changing in the body? Not only what's happening in the body, we notice more because we're less distracted and more present, but the feeling tone, what's going on in the mind, all of these things we're naturally more aware of more and more. So one way that I recommend for all of these practices is to have both aspects. Sometimes it's just describing what's happening as we settle, but we also want to have in our toolkit the ability, when we just feel like it's appropriate, to bring our attention purposely to practice in this way.